Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Keeping It Behavioral, where we're empowering parents one episode at a time and breaking down behavior analytic topics to what they look like in the real world. My name is Ray Trank, and I'm joined by my beautiful co-host.
Justine Cardoza. Today we have another very special guest, the author of What If It's Not Broken? This is Kassi Bogolin. Yes, she is.
Hi, how are you?
We
Thanks for
are
having me.
so great, and thank you for joining us. So just a little bit of background information on Cassie. She is a retired teacher from St. Louis area who holds a master's degree in educational administration and special education, along with graduate certificates in autism studies and trauma. Her work under the KB Protocol brand, which is the brand used to write this lovely
Yep,
book that she
yep.
created, extends far beyond just the book that we're going to be talking about today into children's books, journals, and coloring books, all aiming at filling gaps in social emotional learning materials. A really important resource out there for those who are on the spectrum. So, Cassie, thank you so much for being here with us. Can you just give us a little bit of insight into what inspired you into going into creating the KB Protocol brand and more specifically the What If It's Not Broken book, and just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, first, I just want to say thanks for having me again because I, I was a little bit concerned when we first decided that we were going to do this because I didn't know that our philosophies were going to align so good. And then when I started, getting to know you guys through the podcasts and stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing because I'm not an ABA person. That's not where my philosophy came from. And yet, look at how we're going to be able to blend our thoughts and
Right.
our feelings together and do what's best for kids. And I love that part. So I just want to say thank you very much for having me, and let's get started.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're
Oh my
so
goodness,
glad to
so
have
excited.
you.
Yes, your book is amazing. I know we kind of talked about this before we hit record on this, but Justine and we loved it. It's interactive, it's easily digestible. For those who haven't read the book, What If It Isn't Broken? It's such a good book. Like I just feel like this is such a
Yes.
great place to start for families who are trying to figure out how do I even develop my philosophy on
Right.
supporting a child? Where do I even start? And I feel like you do such a beautiful job of breaking that down and the interactive pieces at the back of the book too.
They're great. All of the
Oh
activities, I was like,
gosh.
oh, this is amazing. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this. Everything was just like a light bulb in my head
Yes.
when I was reading it. So I also wanted to give you that kudos because I love that you're
Oh,
like, I'm
thanks.
going to give you this information and let me give you different activities and tools to digest the information and really understand it and see the perspective of someone who is neurodivergent. And I just thought that was really amazing.
And I do think it is a jump off point for families who are just now
Right.
saying, "Oh my gosh, I think that there's something going on," and
Yeah.
somebody's mentioned autism, and I know that word, but what does it mean?
Yep.
And how is that going to affect my child going into regular public school or even any kind of classroom? How is that going to make me? Um, how am I going to get information? And
Yeah.
that's the jump off point for this book, really. And then it just leads so beautifully into what you guys are doing with your podcast and how you're training parents and expecting them to get information from you just from their podcast. And I loved that part. I thought it was a real good lead in, project for that and how we just kind of flowed together.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do. Well, I mean, and kind of like what Justine was saying about the questions at the back, it makes it also personal. And I
Yeah.
think that that's also a big mission of ours is how do you take the information I'm delivering you and apply that to your own personal journey and experience? And you do such a beautiful job through the examples, through like the questions at the back to guide
Yeah.
families in
Hmm.
making it apply to their life. And so I guess that kind of, as we're talking about your journey and what, kind of inspired you to get here, so you spent your career in a classroom before you started writing this book and kind of beginning all of this. So
Hmm.
what was the moment, or maybe even if it was a student or experience that you had that made you realize that the system was asking the wrong questions?
Well, I've had several students throughout the years, but since I'm a retired teacher, but I did have two students who I thought really um, we did not do the right, not that we didn't do the right thing, but that I saw areas that we could do so much better. And it is really comes down to that part of the idea that classroom teachers are not being given the right tools
Yep.
to work with these students. And I saw something today, and I thought how how wrong it was, because it said it's not fair for the teacher, and the teacher was standing leaning down to a student who was having a meltdown in the
Mm,
classroom, and how it wasn't fair to the other kids in the classroom that the teacher had to stop for that one.
Mm.
And I my thoughts on that were, and maybe I hope I'm answering this question with this example. My thoughts were, if that teacher had had the right tools and we had prepared her or him for that with XYZ, it wouldn't be a stop. It would be
Yeah.
a natural progression of what needs to happen within the regular classroom. And so that was kind of what started my thought process, is that how can I help parents and educators to look at what neurodiversity means, and and get a better grasp of that. And I don't have all the tools in here, and I don't have all the answers, but if you can look at it from a different view, and
Yeah.
just say to yourself, oh, now I understand that everybody can fit into one place as long as we work at that and
yeah.
do that inclusion thing together. And that's how I really got started.
And that's beautiful. And, I think this is actually, it's an interesting tie-in because, in our a recent interview we did with Aria Dean, we were talking about the power of a ripple effect. And
Yep.
I think
Hmm.
kind of what you're talking about here is the power of a ripple effect. When we provide people with tools, when we take the time to educate the educators, we educate the families, provide everyone with support, we're able to do better because we're able to show up better.
Right.
So I think that's really inspirational that that is your springboard for the all the
Mhm.
resources that you've been creating. I think that's fantastic.
And I really resonate with compassionate care. You
Yeah.
guys use that wording in one of them. I don't remember which one. But you were talking about how, you know, the history of ABA and the history of other um, um, kinds of therapies. Um, we just have to learn. We've learned so
Yeah.
much through history, not just with autism, but let's look even farther back to, when we how we would dealt with kids with um, uh, other things, and we put them in institutions, and then we learn these kids can learn. They
Yeah.
shouldn't have been there 100 years ago or 150 years ago. And so
Right.
now we're looking at it and we're saying, there is room for us all to come together with my thoughts, your thoughts, and we can gel, and we can make that happen in a better way for all of the all, educators, parents, the kids, therapists. All of those
Yeah.
people can be better because we're coming together and sharing what we do.
Absolutely. And that's something we've talked about a couple of times across some of our episodes too, is just what we call like a holistic approach to care. So like making sure that we're all on the same page and still using the same strategies to support whoever it is that we're collaborating with. And it's just really so important that the parents are pulled in on that too, because we want to make sure that what we're doing and the strategies that we're using and the perspective that we're able to take, parents are able to understand that perspective too. Because a lot of times I think there's a little bit of a pressure put onto parents of, oh, my kiddo needs to fit into this box and be able to go to school. My kiddo needs to be able to sit in a classroom and not be able to get up and move their body every other 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And that adds a lot of pressure to parents, and that leads to effects on their mental health. Like we were talking about that ripple effect. And we just want to make sure that we're servicing the kiddos and we're providing the need and the support to the families as a whole, and not just specifically the client or the kid or the student that we're working with. And I think that's just another great part about what this book really does is it shifts the narrative and the perspective, and it helps parents get a perspective that doesn't feel like, oh, like this is the end, everything is going to be hard trying to fit into this box. It's like, hey, you can let me give you the strategies to see this in a different light, and then you can teach others how to see this in a different light, and you know how to advocate, because we were also talking about advocacy in that last
Mm-hmm.
interview with Aria Dean. And I think it's just beautiful how all these things are tying back in together and just really trying to support getting those on the spectrum and anyone who's neurodivergent support and acceptance in a world that has been really stringent in the past. And I just love how the message of that book comes through in every chapter. So I just think it was beautiful writing, truly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. But I do want to go back just to your podcast because one thing that I noticed that you guys really did was break down into little pieces of information. And it wasn't overwhelming to sit here for 90 minutes and listen to you talk about it. It was just a quick 30 minutes. Here's a little bit snippet. Could take it away, think about it, chew on it, and then go to the next one. And parents of kids, and I know you've talked about this already, but parents of kids, they're so you talked about in one of the episodes about being overwhelmed and discouraged. And I think that that's what's beautiful about what you guys are doing and how you're doing it, because it just gives them a little bit of information to chew on, take it home. Okay, now I can go back and I can listen to the next one. And I loved that. I love that about the podcasts,
You're so
truly.
sweet. Oh my
Oh, it
gosh.
was so good. I was just so happy with them. I mean, I was just like taking notes, and
Oh my
thinking
gosh.
about
So
all
nice.
the things that no, seriously, just some of it was for me reminders about things, but at the same time, I was really interested in the one about PDA, the pathological demand avoidance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have notes from that, because I thought this is so good for parents. And what in my next book, that it's kind of a follow up to the this one that I've done. I talk specifically more about cases that, I obviously not talking about the child itself, but what an experience that I had with a student or a kid in therapy that I lost my train of thought, but that well, I'm doing more like experiences and how to I handled them so that parents and teachers can caregivers whoever can look at those and say oh, I never thought about doing it like that, let me try
Yeah.
that, or and that's how you start to learn to challenge yourself to do better,
Yep.
Mhm.
because you think you get stuck sometimes. I know parents, especially if they don't have a lot of experience, they get stuck thinking there's only one way to do something, when we know that there's so many opportunities and so many things. I loved when I was teaching to sit down with the people that I worked with at the end of the day. And I worked in a preschool who was doing ABA, but they were not trained to do ABA, which was very, very scary.
Mhm.
And they thought they were very good at it. And I was concerned about some of it. But when you see that they're trying so hard for these kids, and even you want to make sure parents know what the right thing is. And that's what's great about the podcast. I guess I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway.
You know what? But it was all sweet. So
It
thank you.
was.
You're so kind. Justine, do you want to go into her brand?
Yes. So we would love to know more about, what inspired you to come up with the KB protocol brand, and like what does that mean to you, and what are you hoping for it to stand for as it grows bigger and more people learn about it?
Well, it was just a way for me to get a book out there and not use my name in case it was really bad. No, I'm teasing. No, I really had in my mind, and I don't know that I stand by this so much now, because I see the work that people are doing like you guys are doing. And it says, I don't know if I necessarily need a protocol now, but at the time when I started thinking about what would my brand look like if I were to go out into the world like Skinner and say, I believe these things and I'm going to do tests and I'm going to do experiments and then I'm going to come up with a brand or a protocol that will help parents move and teachers and educators and caregivers move forward in um in the idea of neurodiversity. And so that's how I really got started, was thinking about years ago, thinking about what would it look like if I wrote the book, if I made
Yeah.
up the rules for
Love
this. And it wouldn't be this harsh thing over here. It wouldn't be this only this way that comes from over here. It would be all of those things put together. And look where we're
Yeah.
at. Look what we're doing. We're doing
Right.
it. You and
It's
I are doing
approachable.
it. And
Yeah.
that's what's so cool about it. So that's what my thoughts were when I started with KB protocol and what I was thinking about. And the neurodiversity book was just the beginning of what I thought would be a series, and it still is.
Yeah.
I think it's evolved into something a little bit different now than what my thoughts were even 2 years ago when my book came out. You know what I mean? It's
Which
all
is beautiful,
evolving.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of the piece of what you are tying together through your messages. We're constantly doing better, right?
Yeah.
It's not a destination that you reach, it's an active process.
No,
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
that that's incredible. And I think what's amazing about having books like this out there is it's making something that is overwhelming approachable, because like
Yeah.
you're talking about, like Skinner, you have these big names out there who, okay, is the content informative and helpful and obviously has inspired a whole field? Yeah, absolutely. But it's not disseminated in a way that
Mhm.
it is digestible and consumable to the person that it most affects,
Right.
which I think that's
Right.
problematic in itself, right? Like the science that is serving the people should be digestible to those who are receiving the services or are impacted
Hmm.
by it.
Right.
So I think it's amazing that you're challenging that status quo by coming up with your own protocol in a
Right.
way of
Hmm.
challenging that and making it so that everyone can access that information freely. I think that's really, I think a lot of that is so unique and special, and a lot of people aren't doing that. So
Yeah.
I just want to
Right.
give you kudos for that. Which actually kind of brings me into the title.
Hmm.
So it's very bold, right? And it challenges the way that a lot of people would approach intellectual differences, autism. Um, you know, what did that feel like when you chose that as the title? Was it scary to you? Was it
Yes.
liberating? What were your thoughts there?
Yes. It was scary because at the time that and it's been in the works for a while, like probably that the title was probably the very first thing that came to the protocol is what if it's not broken? And the thing is that, and you talked about this in the podcast, you're not going to fix autism. I mean, it's not fixable. It's not like you can give it a pill and it goes away.
Yeah.
It's something that um and the same thought process when I talked about neurodiversity. It's not, it's something that we have to um accept. And I don't even know that accept is the right word terminology for it, but people with differences are living lives now, and they are living good lives, and that's because people like you guys are providing opportunities for people to learn, the parents to learn, the students to learn. And then they're going out in the world and we're saying, hey, you know what, that girl that was in second grade who couldn't speak and didn't have verbal cues, now she's graduating from fourth grade and she says she's going to Europe when she's in high school. I mean, we're doing it. It's
Yeah.
happening. And so that's um when I started, I really wanted to provide hope for parents that it's not broken. Your child is
Yeah.
not broken. Because they use the word autism at the doctor's office for the very first time, and they want you to get some more information, and they want you to go to speech, and they want you to do a sensory class. That doesn't mean it's broken. And that was
Yeah.
my thought behind that. A child is not broken. A child is someone that we can develop. Every child, this is my philosophy from years ago. Every child is gifted. We just have to find out how, and
Yeah.
we have to cultivate that. And that was always my mission. And sometimes it wasn't popular because it didn't fit the norm and it didn't fit inside the box.
Yep.
But I did it anyway, because I knew that that was the best thing for the child.
And
And
that's
in the
great.
end,
Emotional. It makes me a little
I
emotional because
know. She's like a pioneer, and that's what's
yeah,
needed. It's people like you who have gotten us to this point because it took someone to be like, "Hey, let's try something different because this is not working in this situation." That led us to finding all these things, to learning about how to do assent-based care, learning about how to collaborate with other providers to make sure that we were doing what was best as a full team to support the person that we were supporting. So it's just so great to be able to connect with someone who felt brave enough to be like, no, we're not going to stick with that. We're going to try something different, especially because it was different in a way that only served to benefit those that we were working with. And that's
hmm
cool.
well, and to serve a community, when I talk about public school that has a certain amount of money and it has to be spent this way to cover all of these kids. Well, that doesn't necessarily, and we know this, we could debate this for the rest of our lives, but we know that that doesn't necessarily give us the best results for
Yeah.
that child, where to find that gifted part of them. And I spent a lot of minutes, extra minutes in my classroom, um, doing some of the mundane stuff as fast as I could so I could do the stuff that really mattered with the kids later. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and that piece that you touched on about how how you took it into your own hands in terms of like having to get through some of the mundane things to try to make it more engaging and more important for the kiddos that you were working with. I know that's a story of a life of a lot of teachers, right? Those even in
hmm
this day and age where we're having to, use our own money to buy supplies for the kiddos because we don't have those funds provided by the schools. It can be really hard to be in that space. So I was curious, because you also talk about a lot in the book, like practical toolkits for inclusive environments. Can you give our listeners one thing that they could do this week at home or in the classroom that you feel like costs nothing or even next to nothing that can make a difference in making a space feel more inclusive?
Um, so I have a couple of things that are going to come out in my book that I talk about. But if I could give parents, or I could give teachers a- advice, and I have to tell you, my mom taught school for 37 years, and it was kindergarten, but she started out in high school, and for the longest time she would say to me, and I worked in a middle school at the time, as I wasn't even teaching, I was doing something else. And she said, and middle school is like the toughest world in the whole on the whole planet. I mean, it is just and she said, I had to learn very, very quickly, I didn't have to have the last word.
Mm,
And just think about how profound that is. You don't have to have the last word. And in schools right now, and and maybe even in some therapies, and all kinds of places, we were going to get the last word. And you talked about that one time about how he was going to pick up those Legos. You were going to leave him there, and he was going to pick them up the next day. Well, that's having the last word.
yeah.
Yep.
And so profoundly, I say to parents, you don't have to have the last word. You're still the boss. You still make the choices. You can still frame it however you want to frame it and still come out with the results that you want.
Yep.
Mm.
And so I think that that's probably the one gift I'm going to give you about that is you don't have to have the last word. And so many times I come up against someone in my teaching who would come to my room because there was a disturbance and come in the classroom and say, now you stop doing that and you sit down or you go to the quiet room, and or override me when I wasn't saying or doing anything at that point. I was letting it calm. I mean, it has to ride up and come back down. It always does.
Always does.
Okay. And so I was letting it ride up, and the down part is where they need you the most. That's when you're loving and you say, it's okay. I know you broke the chair, but it's going to be okay. There's another day, there's another chair. And so again, if I had one thing that I would tell parents, it's you don't have to have the last word.
Which I think that's beautiful and actually ties in perfectly to another question that we have, which is what is the most outdated piece of advice that well-meaning teachers are still giving? And what should they replace it with? Would you say it's of that similar philosophy?
I would say it's probably that similar thing, because there are so many, and it's, again, I'm not blaming. It's not necessarily all their fault, but I walked into this classroom and I gave this example of a fourth grade girl who didn't quite fit the norm, maybe. And she got into a very rigid classroom. Well, rigid wasn't what she needed. And we still have rigidness in our classrooms because we're trying to get through so much stuff that looks like testing, and so many minutes of reading, and so many minutes of this and so many minutes of that, and we can't have reading during this block, even though it feels better to have it during that block, because that doesn't fit the schedule of the school and the PE and the lunch and all that stuff. And I think that we've created a very rigidness in classrooms that doesn't fit the kids that are coming into those classrooms on a regular basis. Do you see that still? Do you feel that? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And especially in preschoolers and kindergartners and even first graders. I think there was talk a long time ago about adding another grade onto high school so that they could get more credits, or like things that they wanted to do. And I thought that's ridiculous. Where we need to add it is between preschool and kindergarten, or kindergarten and first grade, something in there that says kindergarten's still going to be where you play and you're going to learn social skills, and you're going to learn how to work through your antecedents and your all of those things that you need work on, and somebody's going to be there to guide you through that learning, because you're little bitty and you need that, and that's where it starts, and we could solve a lot of problems there.
And I think that's also why we see so many of our kids in ABA thrive, right? Because I mean, if caveat, if it's done the right way, that they're thriving because we're designing schedules and routines that meet the needs that they have as an individual. And of course, when your needs are met and you're nurtured exactly as you are, you're going to grow, you're going to blossom, you're going to move on to developing all these new skills because someone is taking the time to give you a break every 5 minutes to stretch your body, or maybe they are having you listen to music while you do your tasks, because it doesn't really matter if music is playing in the background. And your brain needs to be successful. And I think, you had said earlier, about that teacher who had kind of stopped everything to give attention to one kid. Sometimes that's what we need, is the flexibility and the time to be able to give individualized attention, because that serves the whole. And I think that people miss that piece a lot, is when you're taking care of all the little pieces, they all work together to make a successful unit.
Right. And I think people misread sometimes that stop about what it shows and what learning message others are getting from it. I do think that it's really important for the other kids around us to see that we're all neurodiverse, and in our own, we all need to be receptive to the differences, and that when we can stop judging those differences and see that we all have our own things, then we can be more accepting,
Yeah. And I
you
think
know.
that goes back into that ripple effect that we talked about, because if we're seeing our teacher take the time to sit and talk to the specific kiddo in our classroom and work through some of those big feelings, then you're modeling for me, because how do kids learn? Through observation and imitation. So then it's like, I see you taking that time to be nice to this person, to listen to their feelings, to ask if they're okay. So when I'm in the same situation with that person, I'm going to imitate the same thing I saw. I'm going to try to ask if they're
Exactly.
okay. I'm going to try to offer those coping strategies. And that's where it starts, right? Is when they're itty bitty, and that's how they learn how to interact with people. If you're always seeing a teacher say, sit down, be quiet, do this, then that's how you're going to respond and think, oh, this person is weird because they're not sitting down and being quiet and doing this. But that's not what it is. It's just they might be a little bit more creative. They might have a little bit more energy. And I think that that's that important piece when with the ripple effect, is that when you're that teacher or you're that safe person in that child's life that can see them and show other people around them how to receive them and how to be in their space and have their perspective, it teaches them too, whether that's the itty bitties in the classroom because they're kindergartners together, or that's the sibling of the client that you're working with or the student that you're working with. There's so many ripple effects that can start from just modeling how to be that inclusive and safe space for that person that we're
Exactly.
interacting with. So that's a big piece of it too.
Right. Good point. Very good.
So kind of to piggyback on that topic, if there's one thing that you could rewrite about how schools are structured in a way that you think would really be a good first step in the direction of being better spaces to serve those who are neurodivergent, what do you think would be a good first step?
Oh gosh, oh, there's so many
That's a big
things that I
question.
think. I know that's a hard one for me. I think the first step is really professional development. I really think that that is the key to doing the right thing by kids. And I mean professional development from the top down. You know, we have to get the school boards on board and
Yeah,
say, you know, we're going to do what's best for kids. And when I say it, I mean it. And I think
yep,
that that's the biggest thing. You know, you can't just say, "Oh, we're doing what's best for kids." We always do what's best for kids, and then you don't. And it's so discouraging for everyone involved in that process then. And principals need to be, you know, I don't know how many times I've worked for someone who had no clue to what was going on or
yep,
what even the definition of autism was. So it's very hard for them to even help me or take my arguments farther up because they don't understand what my concerns are.
right.
So I think that that's probably the biggest thing that we would have to do is start with professional development and say, you know, we're really going to change the way we do things here, and we're really going to, um, you know, I don't know if we call it ABA or we call it our school motto program or what do we call it, but we say we're going to be using this model, and it comes from keeping it, you know, that kind of thing. Or if we say, you know, keeping it behavioral, or if we say this is our school model, I don't know, but that's where I think it has to start.
I love that. And, you know, I think so with the professional development piece, I think you're hitting on a really good point is that there's always gaps and ways that we can supplement our knowledge. Even if you're an expert in the field, there's always
Yeah.
more that we can learn. And I know within your own experience, you know, you earned a graduate certificate in trauma alongside autism studies, right? And so
Right.
that's a big piece, I think, that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
educators, a lot of people supporting intellectual differences and autism, they don't even consider that in the picture of how to provide support. So, kind of on that topic, how does trauma show up in the lives of neurodivergent kids, even adults, in ways that maybe people aren't connecting the dots on?
Well, you know, we're so I think we're doing a better job of understanding trauma um in in the way, you know, in the way that we're pro getting programs for kids, and I think that we're making strides, and we're doing much better, and you guys are a big proponent of that, and it's beautiful. I mean, it really truly is. But I think that we overlook the trauma that's happening in families with siblings, for instance.
Yes.
I think that's a huge thing. I think that they are victims sometimes of the trauma of them, people not understanding their family and not understanding the dynamics of that, and how they might be pushed aside because there's no other way to handle. I mean, it's not pushed aside. I don't mean that parents don't love their children. It's just that this one takes so much of my time.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Isn't that called the glass child phenomena? Is that what that is?
I'm not sure. Maybe so.
Okay.
Now that you say it, it's ringing a bell
I'm
with
like, I
me.
feel like I've heard
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yeah. But and the trauma of parents and trauma. How many marriages end in divorce because one or both of them cannot do that and do their relationships. And I
Yeah.
think you start to look at the ABCs of trauma and what they look like, and the list. And many of these families have triggers that are happening within their own their own home. And so then that in itself is really hard for a child with autism to get, for us to help them, because they're also going through that.
Yeah, that I feel like that was such a good point to touch on, especially in regards to like the siblings and parents and other people in the family who are affected, because their experience with this matters too. And I love that piece of my job as a BCBA because I do a lot of like parent training and a lot of in family and in community things. And the other day I was able to take a kiddo to their brother's baseball game, and they've never been able to sit through an entire baseball game because
You.
the kiddo
Oh,
just
that's
needs a little bit more.
awesome.
And mom got to see the entire game, and that was such a big thing, and that just feels so fulfilling and so important in what we're doing for the lives to combat some of that trauma, right? In the thought of like, oh, I never thought I'd be able to watch my other son's baseball game, and now we get to watch it together, and
Mm-hmm.
and how meaningful that one moment could be for the family or for the parent. So I love that you brought that up because I think that's such an important piece that sometimes the field of ABA can miss and providers can miss because it's holistic, right? It's not just we service this kiddo from 8 to 4 and they go home and everything is hunky dory. It's a lot
Right.
deeper and a lot more meaningful for the community that we work with. And I just love that you brought that up because there is supports needed for everyone involved to make sure everyone feels like they have the support and someone to listen and to hear them and be inclusive because it's a different community, and it's nice to know that people care enough to think about everyone involved to make
Mm-hmm.
their lives more meaningful. So that was a really good piece that you touched
And
on.
to do this,
Right.
to write this kind
Well,
of
and
stuff, right?
the other thing that I thought about when I named that book, and I maybe I should have said it earlier, but I really thought about the grandparents, because grandparents are of a different generation.
Yes.
And so now they have a their child has a baby, and the baby is autistic or has autism, or whatever they would say. And they don't know how to handle it, but they're asked to babysit. So then they babysit every day after school from 3:30 to 5:30, or whenever mom can get off of work. And mom comes in, and now they have all of this, what they think is good um advice, when really I hope that they would take my book and they would read my book and say, oh, I'm not looking at this at all the way that that other people are looking at, or
Yeah.
gives me a new perspective, and let me think about some of the things that I've said in the past and how I can change that. And so that's the caregiver piece that I was thinking of, is it was really grandparents, because we do rely on them to get us to and from places, and feed us. And he won't eat this, he just won't eat
Yeah.
this, I've tried everything. Well, no, he's not going to eat that. I
Yeah.
can just tell you.
Yeah.
And
Good
so,
try. It's not gonna
yeah,
happen. Yeah.
right. But if you really listen to the podcast and go through all of the steps of the podcast. You hear, I can hear you saying, even to grandparents, these are the things that we can do to help you be a better caregiver for those kids. And it'll be better for you,
Yeah,
Improves
you know?
everyone's situation, right? I mean,
Oh
exactly.
yeah, absolutely.
feeling understood creates this beautiful, smooth, like it's like as soon as everyone understands what's going on, there's a flow state that exists within the
Yeah.
whole family system.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like
Yes.
that is so empowering when you finally feel like you understand someone. I mean, I can think about cases I've had in the past where, the kiddo was nonverbal, used a lot of gestures, or even just facial expressions to indicate what was going on. And as soon as you understood that language, you understood the triggers, you understood the things that brought joy, it's trust. And trust
Yes.
creates
Mm-hmm.
a flow state and the things you're able to achieve when you hit that point
Mm-hmm.
Right.
will surprise you every day, you
Yep.
know?
Right. And then
So
just how relaxed you would be if you were a mama and you know every single day that grandma's going to say, "Well, he wouldn't eat the yogurt that I gave him. He wouldn't eat the yogurt." And today she said, "You know what? He wouldn't eat yogurt, but he ate gummy bears, so we just had those." And mom's happy,
mhm,
grandma's relaxed, kids sitting there. He's had a great time at grandma's house, and they get in the car and it's relaxed.
Yes.
It's
That
not
ripple
that
effect.
trauma, not
it's
that trauma that
priceless.
we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
for that day, what a miracle that would be for some families, and for those people that you talked about that are burnt out.
Yeah.
Just even one day can make all the difference.
Yep.
That's what a beautiful, I mean, I so agree that that's priceless. And I think people don't realize how much that can wear on you over time is when you're not picking your battles, when you're not
Yep.
thinking
Hmm.
about the size of the problem that's happening. Does it really matter if you skipped one yogurt and had gummy bears that day? Not
Right,
really, right?
right,
It's
exactly.
picking your battles, it's choosing what matters, and that improves quality of life. And people don't think about that, right? Kind of
Hmm.
going back to what you talked about before, it's picking that hill to die on. It's figuring out, the last word, right?
Right,
Sometimes
right,
it's not worth it. It's just
right.
not.
And
Um,
and uh, and that's another training, that's another day, another training for teachers. But
yeah.
you don't have to win every battle. And
No.
that's what I'm saying. You don't have to have the last word. You don't. Okay, so turn around. They said no, they're not going to do what you said. Okay, turn
Okay.
around and walk away and see what happens. Because chances are, in my experience, 80% of the time or more, they're going to go ahead and do it, even though they said they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean,
Your
they just
idea,
do.
right?
They just do. So why even fight that battle? You don't
Right.
even have to say it because it's
Absolutely.
Right.
going
Just
to probably
put it
get
down, walk
done.
away.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Right.
Which
Yep.
actually, ties into something that we also wanted to ask you was about, what do you hope our neurodivergent person who maybe is reading this book, they pick it up, who's not a parent or a teacher, but someone who spent their whole life being told that there's something wrong with them, that they need to fit into the mold of what already exists to be normal, to fit in, you know, how would you kind of feel about that? What do you hope that they feel when they read your book?
That's book two.
Ooh,
Love
you
Well,
it.
heard it here
and
first,
I'm
everyone.
going to
You
give a
heard
little.
it.
I'm going to give a little just information about book two, but start where you are.
Mm,
That really is my message for the new book. Start where you are. And I'm sharing that because I don't want it left unsaid if it takes me another year or something. But for those people who said, I've been neurodivergent all my life, and now people don't understand, and now it's just beginning, and I'm 24 years old, and I didn't have all of this stuff that the people are talking about now, and I wish I would have. Start where you are.
Yep.
mm,
Start to see what you can do, what changes you can make. A really good example of that was a story that I heard in some of my training, because I did do some very extensive training in Houston. But a boy had gone to college, and he had lived in the same room. He had everything the way he wanted it. He wasn't going to leave because summer came. He was just going to stay right there. And then they said, "You have to move from this room to a different building because we're painting.
Mm.
Now, this person with autism freaked out, okay? Put all of his stuff in boxes. Now everything is not where it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
And he moves to a different room, and he gets in there that night, and he's up till 4 o'clock in the morning, and finally, or some ridiculous time. And he calls his therapist and he says, I don't know what to do. And he said, what do you mean you don't know what to do? And he said, I don't know what to do. There's all these boxes, and I don't know what to do. And he said, well, didn't they number them? And he said, yes. And he goes, you start with number one.
Mm.
And that's all it really takes, is starting with number one. And I think that that's a really powerful message about start where you are,
Yep.
start with number one.
I think that ties really well back into the first book, because for parents, sometimes it's like I get a diagnosis and then there's 1,000 things you're thinking about. You're like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, okay, now I have to figure out if we need to go to therapy. Do we need speech? Do we need OT? What are they going to do when I'm gone? What are they going to do in 30 years? Are they going to ever have a love life? Are they ever going to have friends? Like, you get
Right.
flooded with all these questions and anxieties and fears. And then I think the point that you just made about just start with the first step, start at number one. Just take it tomorrow, see what the day
Right.
wakes up. Okay, they told me this diagnosis. What is the next step I have to do? Let's focus on my next step. We don't have to solve all the problems in one day. We don't have to answer all the questions in one day.
Right.
Let's just do the next thing. And that's already going above and beyond. That's already being able to make it to the next step. And that can be hard too, going from
Mm-hmm.
step one to step two. But as long as you're just focusing on the next thing, it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be an overwhelming flood of anxiety. It doesn't have to be, and you never know what you learn in that step that makes the next step easier. So I think that
Right.
was a really good point, and I'm so excited to read this next book. We're gonna have to have you back to talk about it, because
Well,
it
yeah,
sounds like some good
absolutely.
things are coming.
Maybe it'll get me motivated. I work on it. I work on it a little bit every week, but I probably need to get like where I work on it every day. It's
Well, we
just
would love to have you back for it.
I've got two other kids books in the works. So I'm trying to balance all my time through all of that stuff. But yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. You sound like you have a
Yeah.
lot of good things coming, and we would love to support any and all the endeavors that you do. The message that
And the
you're
same
you're
goes
sharing
for
is
you guys.
amazing.
I am so impressed. I just want to go out and share and tell the world to be watching this. As a matter of fact, I did tell my daughter about um the PDA one today and said, you've got to watch this. You've got to listen to this. It's so good. It's not very long, and all you have to do is just listen to it. So it's out there, and I'm gonna share it. And I'm so glad you guys are doing this. And thank you so much for having me
Oh
on
my
here.
gosh, thank you. I just have to say, you have the most beautiful energy and just
Yes.
like clearly the biggest heart. It's just like contagious, your passion. And we need more people with the heart that you have, making such a difference. And we're both so grateful that you took the time to share about, your amazing book, your journey, your next steps. I mean, what an honor to have you on the podcast tonight.
Oh, thank
So
you.
Truly.
Thank you so
really,
much.
thank you so, so much for
Yeah,
being here.
I'm really, really glad we got to do it. So thank you for having me.
Yes, us too. Well, awesome. We are keeping it behavioral. We are guiding autism and fostering hope. We are here for every other weekend with a new episode. So please be sure to follow us so you can get notified on our next upload. Follow us on Insta, Facebook, YouTube at Keeping It Behavioral, and check out our website at sites.google.view/keeping it behavioral. We also have created a visual in connection to this episode as a quick reference. So please check that out for our socials. We are behavior analysts, but we are not giving individualized advice or treatment guidance, just creating a community of support. Cassie, thank you so much for being part of our community, and we will see you guys next time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.